Henry Howard Holmes, whom reporters dubbed the torture doctor, is America's first officially registered serial killer. The history of his crimes is full of horrific cruelty and secrets, and the hotel he created to carry out his criminal activities has become one of the most sinister locations in the United States. Many psychologists and detectives note the special ingenuity of some serial killers, but the sick imagination of the subject of our article today can astonish even the most hardened cynics. Henry Howard Holmes, who claimed, according to various estimates, from 27 to 250 victims, went further than his colleagues in the trade and built an entire hotel where he carried out his brutal crimes for many years. What were the motives of America's first serial killer? How did he manage to keep his criminal activities in the shadows for so long? And what was the finale of the most high-profile case of the 19th century? Herman Webster Mudgett, Holmes' real name, was born on May 16, 1861, in New Hampshire. His father, Levi Horton Mudgett, was a very cruel man and raised his son strictly. The boy was often subjected to both physical and psychological abuse in childhood, which made him withdrawn and insecure. At school, Herman also had a difficult time with his classmates. His peers teased him, bullied him in every way, and upon learning of the boy's fear of the dead, forced him to touch a skeleton in the nurse's office. However, this experience did not frighten the child. On the contrary, even then he realized that he was interested in how the human body was constructed. As Herman grew older, his relationship with his parents deteriorated. According to his stories, when the Great Chicago Fire happened, 1871, he, upon learning of the terrible event, spent a long time imagining how his father and mother were dying in the fire, although in reality, the parents of the future owner of the murder hotel were in no way connected with the fire. In addition, according to biographers, Herman began conducting various experiments on animals as early as age 11, but no data confirming this information has survived. After graduating from college, Herman Mudgett entered the University of Michigan and received a medical degree in 1884. Studying came easily to the young man, but new knowledge was not the only thing that interested him during his university years. From his first year, Herman stole corpses from the laboratory, staged accidents, having previously taken out insurance policies on the deceased, and thus received payments. After graduating from university, Herman moved to Chicago and took up pharmaceuticals, simultaneously pulling off small real estate and insurance scams. A few years later, he married for the first time. His chosen one was a longtime acquaintance, Clara A. Lovering, whom, according to biographers, Mudgett treated cruelly, regularly beating and insulting her. Soon his wife ran away from him, but the marriage was never officially dissolved. In 1886, Herman changed his name, taking the pseudonym Henry Howard Holmes, which, in his opinion, sounded more respectable. A year later, he again tied the knot. This time his choice fell on a woman named Myrta Belknap, and this union was stronger than the previous one. A few years later, the couple had a daughter, Lucy, and soon the family moved to a wealthy neighborhood in Chicago, where Holmes acquired real estate. However, this marriage was not destined to last long. Soon Henry was a bachelor again not officially filing for divorce. Then he married several more times, actually being a polygamist, but all his love affairs were short-lived. It is worth noting that Henry Holmes was a very charming man. He had excellent manners, dressed well, knew how to behave in society and maintain a conversation. Thanks to his skills, he easily gained people's trust. At various times he committed several scams that brought him good money, but this was not enough for Henry. He dreamed of real wealth and a luxurious life. Soon he met Dr. Holton, the owner of a pharmaceutical store who was suffering from cancer. Seizing the opportunity to take over the pharmacy, Holmes convinced the doctor's wife that she would not be able to run the family business after her husband's death. He bought the pharmaceutical store from her for next to nothing and turned it into a profitable business. There is a theory that immediately after the sale of the pharmacy, Dr. Holton and his wife disappeared without a trace, but currently this information can neither be refuted nor confirmed. Later, Holmes decided to expand his business and bought an empty lot opposite the pharmacy. Combining the territories, he began construction of a hotel that locals dubbed the Castle. The impressive building consisted of 3 floors. The first housed the pharmacy and several small shops, while the second and third floors housed the hotel itself, which was more like a deadly maze than comfortable accommodation for guests. The fact is that Henry Holmes originally planned to build a hotel in which only he could find his way around. He regularly changed contractors and crews during construction, so no one ever saw the full plan of the building and no one knew what secrets the walls of the castle hid, and there were many of them, by the way. When construction was completed, Holmes set about implementing his plans. His first victims were women who got jobs with him on the condition of mandatory life insurance. Naturally, after their deaths at the hands of Holmes, the insurance payments went into his pocket. However, wealth alone was not enough for the killer. He was a sadist and wanted to use the hotel's facilities to carry out his atrocities. For example, Holmes' castle had several rooms that were actually gas chambers. In addition, the maniac's arsenal also included completely soundproof rooms where he would lock hotel guests without food and water for weeks and months. Rooms equipped with various torture instruments, 2 furnaces, and a huge collection of various poisons. Unlike many other maniacs, Holmes always used different weapons and methods of killing. He did not have his own signature, but one thing remained constant for a long time: the place where he killed. Since Holmes was a former medical student, he easily managed to sell the bodies of his victims to colleagues for laboratories. As a rule, they were not interested in where Henry got so many corpses from, but if someone started asking too many questions, the owner of the castle immediately got rid of the curious inhabitants. However, after a few years, Henry had to leave Chicago due to the economic crisis and pressure from creditors to whom he owed a large sum. First, Holmes went to Texas and then for some time traveled through American states, pulling off insurance scams and killing people. According to experts, he had between 27 and 250 victims to his name. In 1894, Henry Holmes again tried to commit fraud, but this time he failed to avoid punishment. He was arrested in Boston and sentenced to a short prison term. But even in prison, Holmes' desire for easy money did not fade. Soon he met a criminal named Marion Hedgepeth and persuaded him to participate in an insurance fraud for $20,000. But his plan did not work out. So Henry decided to approach the matter more thoroughly. Using the previous fraud scheme as a basis, he met another prisoner named Benjamin Pitzel. According to other data, Holmes knew Pitzel before and even used him as an assistant in removing bodies from the hotel, and offered him to participate in the scam. According to Holmes' plan, Pitzel was supposed to fake his own death so that his wife Carrie could get $10,000, and then this amount would be divided between the accomplices. When Mrs. Pitzel received the payout and her husband, together with Henry, were released, Holmes killed Benjamin and came up with a plan to get rid of Carrie and her 5 children. Henry convinced Mrs. Pitzel that her husband was alive and waiting for her in a secret place, according to some reports, in London, which they had chosen for hiding, and also persuaded the woman to give him custody of her 3 children, Alice, Nellie, and Howard. He explained this by saying that it would be easier for Carrie to get to her destination. In the following weeks, Holmes regularly sent telegrams to Mrs. Pitzel, telling her how much fun he was having with her children. But in reality, things were different. According to witnesses who saw Henry in the company of the children, they looked emaciated, frightened, and tired. But Holmes, who, by the way, always introduced himself under different names, showed no interest in them. After some time, Henry again sent Carrie a letter with a detailed account of his journey in the company of her children, promising that soon everything would finally be over. However, later witnesses noted that at the time of sending the telegram, Holmes was already appearing everywhere alone. As it turned out later, The killer got rid of the burden in the form of Mrs. Pittizl's heirs and continued to deceive the woman in order to get to the money she received from the insurance. However, it was Henry Holmes' insane greed that ultimately ruined him. The fact is that in all the places in the USA and Canada where he stayed with the children, he was very well remembered, since the impeccably dressed gentlemen and dirty children in rags attracted public attention. Later, when Holmes' former cellmate Marion Hedgepeth, who was supposed to take part in Henry's first failed scam, was released, he wrote a letter to the insurance company, detailing their fraudulent plan and naming the lawyer who agreed to carry it out. According to the agreement, Hedgepeth was supposed to receive $500 from Holmes for help in finding the right lawyer, but in the end, he was left with nothing. Company employees immediately linked the letter to the recent Benjamin Pittizl case and passed the information to the police and the Pinkerton Detective Agency. On November 17, 1984, Holmes was arrested, thanks to numerous witnesses who at various times saw Henry in the company of Mrs. Pittizl's children, as well as letters that Alice, Nellie, and Howard wrote to their mother. The killer, of course, did not send them but kept them with him. Detectives had no difficulty reconstructing his route and examining the houses and hotels where he stayed. In one of his rented homes in Toronto, the remains of the children he killed were found. After that, the police were able to trace the rest of Henry Holmes' criminal history and soon found themselves in his hotel in Chicago. Upon inspecting the premises, the detectives were horrified by how sophisticated the maniac's methods of killing were. Numerous remains were found in the basement of the building, and police officers discovered various torture instruments in the rooms and secret corridors. After the investigation data was made public, Holmes' hotel was immediately renamed the Murder Castle by the press, and the criminal himself began to be called the Torture Doctor or Devil. For several years, the public tirelessly followed the course of the investigation, and soon a decision was reached on the case. In 1896, Henry Howard Holmes was found guilty of the murder of Benjamin Pittizl and his 3 children, as well as 27 murders in different US and Canadian cities and 6 attempted murders, while the maniac himself gave very contradictory testimony. At one time, he claimed that he had killed more than 200 people because he was guided by Satan, and then said that he was innocent. On May 7th of the same year, Holmes was executed, but even after the sentence was carried out, his infamy continued to excite people's minds. For a long time, the public believed that the cunning killer had managed to deceive justice and escape, passing off another person as himself. This version gained huge popularity, and in 2017, a group of scientists even decided to exhume Holmes' corpse to examine it. As it turned out, the conspiracy theory was just a fantasy of the agitated public, and the serial killer's remains were indeed in the grave.